the most amazing book you could ever read. And here is the title: My Country is the World. Fabulous, well written, exciting film. Later film. Book first, film next. So today we've already done chapter 1 and 2. It's okay if you haven't read those or whatnot. We're going to dive right into chapter 3. We're so welcome to have Michael Walsh cover that. And Michael, let's start with the summary of this incredible chapter 3. Michael, take it away.
Yeah, chapter 3 is really exciting because it's like a parallel from the past to the present of what David and I are trying to build now, which is a registry of world citizens and go digital, not just having a physical passport, but you could have a digital version of the passport, which could, of course, scale much faster. So that's our dream project that we've been working on for a long time. And so the reason I say that is because what Garry Davis finds himself in a situation in Paris where he's basically been thrown out of the country, but he needs to stay and continue his quest and bringing out the whole concept of world citizenship and creating possibly a world government or a world parliament that would outlaw any kind of war in the future and keep the world at peace and really allow the United Nations to live its purpose, which is to guarantee peace in the world between all nations. And so Gary's in Paris, and he's being harassed by policemen. He's being questioned, and he's got an opportunity to get a title of a type of identity card that they eventually offered to him, and he's like, he's on the cusp of wanting to take it because he would have an identity, but it was totally antithetical to his purpose of being a world citizen. So he turns it down, but he does find refuge in this little plot of land in Paris, which has been designated international territory by the United Nations. And so he has a tiny little sanctuary in this restaurant and right near the Eiffel Tower and right in this territory of the United Nations. And the restaurant is like part of the United Nations, right? So he's there, and the reporters start coming, and that's exciting because the word of this movement is getting out. This concept of being a world citizen and ending war in the future is very popular, of course, in France, and all of Europe has just been decimated by World War II. So people are very receptive to the concept of that Garry is announcing to the world where world law could outlaw war. And so reporters come, and then some top French philosophers start showing up. The main one who coordinates things, his name is Sarrazac. And Sarrazac helps Garry get the word out to all kinds of other great philosophers like Camus and the other leading intellectuals in France at the time. And they are rallying behind Garry and his concept, including Albert Einstein as well. So, David, you want to add to that and help me out?
Well, I mean, yeah, when I go into chapter 4, I'm going to really also flesh out what happened after he started camping out on the steps of the Palais de Chaillot, and so
right.
Please go forth with what your thoughts about chapter 3.
Right. So Gary's being interviewed by reporters, from around the world. That it truly is becoming a global story because stories are appearing in the New York Times and in countries throughout Europe. And so Gary's really got a little bit of a pulpit here. He's on stage. He's got a lot of eyes on him. People writing articles, news coming out about this idea, this concept of a movement of world citizenship. So he's excited about that, but at the same time, he's stressed about his personal situation, and he's camping out in this restaurant. And then he's getting, at one point, then they come, since he refused that French offer of the titre de séjour, a little bit of an identity card, since he refused that, they come and they arrest him. And so it kind of, plays out like that. Let's see,
Michael, I can mention something about Rufus King, actually,
yes,
since that's in this chapter. On my first day working at World Service Authority, which was, I think, maybe March 2nd of 1992. So whatever that is, almost 34 years ago.
world history.
Yeah, one of the first people I met was Rufus King, an attorney who was working at a really prestigious law firm called Berliner, Corcoran and Rowe here in Washington, D.C. Garry had uh, put me on the back of his motorcycle, gave me a helmet, fortunately, and we started driving around town so he could introduce me to, as his new lawyer at World Service Authority, to meet certain people in town. That he wanted to let know that finally World Service Authority would have a permanent legal advocacy team and department to help the global public, whether it's with using their documents like the World Passport or their ID, or just people even who don't have WSA documents, refugees, stateless persons who needed us to draft, for example, an amicus curiae, friend of the court brief to support someone's right to stay in a country so they aren't deported back to a place where they could be persecuted or further persecuted. So it was amazing to meet Rufus King on my first day at the office, and it was this beautiful paneled, wood paneled room. And Garry brought me into the room, and then Garry and Rufus hugged each other because they had known each other at that point, whatever that was, 50 or 60 years already at that point. And so the first question that Garry asked Rufus was, "Well, we've got this new lawyer, but we don't know what to call him." so, so Rufus said, "Well, David, what are you going to be doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be the lawyer for the organization." He said, "Well, that's a general counsel. You're going to be representing the organization." And what was so nice of Rufus is over the next several years, he would mentor me. We'd go to lunch at his fancy DC lunch places, and we would sit there and talk about old times, like his booklet about, and I can't remember, Garry mentions it in the book, but I can't remember, Secession into the World Community. That's what it was called. And about his time with Garry back in the late 40s. But I realized my time at WSA, at World Service Authority, would not be, as a general counsel, would not really be so much to be protecting the organization as most general counsels do for corporations. Working for this nonprofit, I realized that really my main two clients were humanity and the earth. So it was really to protect everybody else and give everybody else a voice and affirming their rights. So yeah, I was delighted that I got to meet one of the people here in chapter 3, who Garry was a lifelong friend of Rufus, and he even gave the eulogy at Rufus's memorial when he died.
Oh my God, David, humanity and the earth. Wow.
Those are our clients.
What, how beautiful. What a beautiful thing to say. Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you for doing that all these years. Incredible work. Yes, Michael, did you have anything else about this? And then we'll go into a discussion about it.
Well, I've been a startup guy for quite a long time now. And, one of the things that is key to investors to hear is like, what is your target market? Have you defined your market well? And the one taboo is that one thing you're not supposed to say is everybody. But here we are, and we're like, we'll be able to say, well, we've got 8 billion potential clients, so, there's no limit to our ambition. And we can actually say that as a startup, creating a digital version of the World Citizen Passport for world peace and ending the insanity of warfare. And now it's 2025. It's time to stop.
Yes.
So take it away, David. Well done.
Right before we go.
That's a great story with Rufus King. How about that? Brought the chapter to life.
Exactly. I thought perhaps we would just go around and anybody quickly, anything you want to add to that before we go to chapter 4. Anybody, any questions?
Well, what I forgot to mention is that Rufus really was Gary's ear on in the law. In a sense, Rufus was there to support Gary's status as a world citizen and back him up legally. And this is why he met Gary on the steps of the Palais de Chaillot to say, "Look, can I be your lawyer?" So that was really an important aspect that I should have mentioned.
Oh, yeah, and so hello, Richard. Great to have you here. Anyone want to make a comment? Richard, did you have a comment? Anybody else? Anybody have a comment?
Stephen.
All right.
Hi there. No, nothing to say. Sorry, I'm joining as you see a little bit late there.
No
And
worries.
yeah, and
Very happy that.
Annabelle is with me here today. So
Oh, fantastic.
yeah, so
Fantastic. Annabelle, hello.
Well,
Hello.
Stephen, you didn't miss too much. We just covered chapter 3 and how Garry Davis finds himself in Paris without any legal status, and he lives on international territory that is designated by the UN as a refuge. And then he's interviewed by a lot of reporters. And then Rufus King, an attorney from the United States, comes to help him. And all the French philosophers and intellectuals and Albert Einstein are all rallying behind him and promoting the concept of world citizenship.
Wow, Michael. So a shorter summary. Very good.
very
Very good.
good
Thank
summation
you.
for sure.
Thank you
Okay.
for that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, then on that note, we'd like to ask David Gallup to go to take us away to chapter 4.
Okay, I actually still have some comments on chapter 3.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
So, we mentioned this last time in the conversation last week. Gary, being an actor and a comedian, he was quick on his feet. He could think very quickly. One of the things I love to say about Gary is, even though he wasn't trained as a lawyer, he was one of the best lawyers that I ever knew, actually. And the fact that he was so clever and could think so quickly was what made him so successful as the embodiment of world citizenship. And the example of that on page 43 of chapter 3 was when one of the UN security guards saying, Mr. Davis, you have to leave. I'm going to force you off of international territory. And Gary said, well, if you do that, you'll be breaking the law. You can't do that because I had to leave France because they rejected me to stay here. I came onto international territory, which was ceded from the French government to the UN. So I'm here legally on this territory. If you take me out and port me back into France, you'll be breaking the law. So, of course, the UN security guard was like, oh, okay, I better get some orders from somebody higher up to figure out what to do. And of course, that's also shown in the wonderful film that Melanie and Arthur have directed and produced, The World Is My Country, which I'm sure all of you have seen it, but for people who haven't, please go to theworldismycountry.com to watch this film. Incredible. And I'm so delighted that we might take this film further with the help of people like Martin Sheen to tell this story in new and different ways. But so, yeah, it was just really always, whenever I read this book again, like you said, Melanie, you've probably read it 50, 60 times. Every time I read it again, I learn something new, or I think about Gary in a new way and how he was able to do some of these amazing things, which took a lot of guts, you might say, to be able to stand out there by himself in representing humanity, sort of the first to do this and to pave the way for the rest of us to be world citizens. Because, of course, at the end of Gary's life, he talked about how, maybe world citizenship and the movement will really take off after I'm gone. Because he would always say, oh, people come to me and say, Gary, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? You're the leader of this movement. And Gary would always say, well, no, we're all the leaders of this movement. We each have to do this. So maybe once I'm gone, that's when everyone else will take their place in making this movement move forward. So that was just the other little aspect of chapter 3 that I wanted to mention. Any questions about that before I start talking about chapter 4?
I would just conclude by saying that the whole idea, the whole concept of world citizenship and being a world citizen is you don't abdicate anything. You're still an American citizen. You're still a Swiss citizen. You're still a Portuguese citizen. That is always going to be part of you. That's where you're from. But it's a way of looking at the worldview, and it encompasses the entire world, and that we should not be fighting, and that we need to cooperate as world citizens to outlaw war.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Michael. It's so important for everyone to know that when you claim world citizenship status, when you register as a world citizen from World Service Authority and get a world citizen card and world citizen certificate, you are not giving up any other allegiance, status, identity that you have. In fact, you're really protecting those other allegiances by claiming that higher awareness of your link to humanity and your link, of course, to the earth, us as stewards of the planet. And Garry always said, I'm really proud of my American heritage. There were so many things about America that Garry did like musicals, for example, and movies. I mean, he loved going to listen to musicals, going to movies. I mean, as an actor, of course, he loved that. And really wanted to say that I'm not really giving up my quote unquote American cultural identity. I'm really just giving up that requirement that where the government, as a national government, might force me to kill other human beings. As you were saying, Michael, we need world citizenship is what we need to think beyond the nation state and find a way to unite. So that we can outlaw war and prevent, and make sure that killing is considered as murder everywhere. And that's what I think Garry was such an expert at doing, and being able to speak to many different audiences. I mean, as a former bomber pilot and having been in the military, he could get the ear of people who were in the military, but also as an actor and comedian, he could make just us as the general public laugh and think about who are we really in this, especially now in the 21st century. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Michael. Well, so I'll start moving into chapter 4, but please wave your hand or jump in case you have any questions. Oh, and before I forget, in the chat, Arthur Bogomil Burton mentioned that he is the person listed as public. He's at a public library, and that's why it's listed as public. And I can tell you, I've known him also for many, many years. He has carried the world citizen flag on peace walks all around the world, and it's our old version of our logo, which looks like this on a big yellow flag. I don't have the flag here to hold up to show you right now. But he's carried that on a wooden pole all around the world to promote peace and justice for all humans, carrying on Garry's idea of seeing ourselves as more than simply a citizen of one nation, but rather a citizen of the world. And he's saying that he and Garry were in the Baha'i Center in Los Angeles in 2002 when he met Garry, and that at that time he was promoting peace because the world was entering into the war in Iraq and other parts of Asia. Melanie, did you want to say something?
He's talking about Arthur Kanegis. Yeah, they both have the
Arthur.
same first name.
Oh, okay,
Arthur
sorry.
Kanegis,
I thought it was
Arthur Kanegis and Garry.
Burton meeting. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no
Okay.
worries.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I'm not sure whether Arthur Burton had ever met Garry personally. Maybe he had at some event in another part of the world. And Arthur Burton, hopefully you could put in the chat if that's
a little story. Yeah,
a little story.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'll go into chapter 4 now. So this was really, 1948. It was really only 3 years after the end of World War II. Not even 2.5 years, and there was so much weariness of war at this point. But the Cold War had actually already started. And Garry alludes to at the beginning of chapter 4, the Berlin airlift. And I actually had to research this some more because it had been a long time since I had studied this, probably in high school history class. But the Soviet Union had blocked aid, food and oil and other things from entering West Berlin, because they had controlled, most of Eastern Germany, and Berlin was in part of Eastern Germany. So this was already the start of you might say the enmity between the sort of the capitalist system or the Western allies and the communist system or the Soviet Union. So during that time, the United States and United Kingdom primarily actually airlifted in food and oil and other supplies into Berlin, and that was almost for a full year that they were doing this to help the people living in Berlin, a world city. And right before the end of the blockade, uh, the Western Allies created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, which Garry saw as another illusion of security that naturally divides humans from humans. And I won't read it, but I can show you, and you can see this is really an archival document. This is typical of what you would see of Garry Davis's papers, an archival document literally typed on a typewriter that we have, been able to get a mimeograph of his whole long statement about how he sees this as a sad day. This was written the night before NATO actually was created. It's another sad day for humanity to have created an organization that's really just going to separate people rather than bringing humans together. Well, so at this point, Garry was still receiving stacks of letters, many which had suggestions of next steps of what should happen in the world citizenship movement. Garry told me once that yes, they registered at the Registry of World Citizens in Paris that was launched in January of 1949, that they registered about 750,000 to 1 million people over the course of the next few years, but that actually they had received postcards and letters and wires and other things from close to 8 million people from around the world during those first few heady days, as Garry would call it, of his giving up his citizenship and really launching the modern world citizenship movement. Well, so one of the suggestions, and Garry mentions it on page 44 of chapter 4 of My Country is the World, is the launching of world citizen clubs. So people could come together, talk about world citizenship, and determine what could they do in their own local community. And that's really, I think, was sort of the impetus for the People Powered Planet podcast, and for the World is My Country Club, is to see ourselves as world citizens, to come together every week to talk about this idea from different perspectives, from human rights perspective, from an environmental perspective, from a justice perspective, from a peace perspective, not to silo ourselves off, but to link ourselves in all of these different advocacy movements, you could say, under the banner of world citizenship. And what I'm really, really excited about, which has nothing to do exactly with this chapter, but does relate to World Citizen Clubs, is in addition to the World is My Country Club and this podcast, World Service Authority started launching World Citizen Clubs first here around the United States. Right before the pandemic, we had a club running really well at Webster University in St. Louis, Missouri. That, unfortunately, with the pandemic, students couldn't get together, so most clubs on campus has ended. But right after the pandemic, we launched another club at George Mason University, which has many students, anywhere from 20 to 40 students going to their events. Every time they have an event, they do advocacy events to promote, for example, on campus free speech, especially for immigrants and international students who are under threat here in the United States from the governmental actions, and to talk about how to safely speak out, for example. They've also have done a lot of volunteering events, like going to parks to do cleanups. So being a good local world citizen is the same thing as also being a global, you might say, world citizen, and helping out your community. So I'm excited about that we're launching these World Citizen Clubs. You could go to worldcitizenclub.org if you know of any students in high school or college who might want to launch a club on their campus. We have detailed information about how to launch a club, suggestions of what you can do with a club. The club at George Mason just had a global game night just a few nights ago, where they brought in games from different cultures around the world, and they actually played the games to learn about what do other people in other cultures do, and how do they game, and how can we gamify things sort of together, which is exciting. And we're actually just launched, believe it or not, just really last week at James Madison University, which is actually another university in Virginia, another World Citizen Club. We're hoping to launch, we have to hear back from American University, but a World Citizen Club at American University. So we're, in a sense, starting around the DC area now where World Service Authority is located, and then going to be expanding to other cities which have a lot of universities already in them, like Boston or New York or Los Angeles or Chicago. But it could be anywhere in the country or in the world, if wherever you are, in Deutschland, in Canada, wherever you might be. If you know of young people who might want to start a club, please let me know. It's sort of similar to what Rotary does with Rotaract, right? The young Rotary people coming into Rotary to also take action and support advocacy events, which we would love to see our World Citizen Clubs interact with Rotaract also, so the students can do both actually, and have even more power in their words and in their actions. So that's where we are in our World Citizen Clubs. Sorry to have taken such a long refrain from chapter 4, but let me get back into it. Well, so in addition to this idea of starting World Citizen Clubs, another idea that came to mind was to create this World Citizen Registry, which really did eventually happen, but several months later. And Robert Sarazak, who Michael had mentioned, his actual family name is Soulage, but he became known as Sarazak. He was a French intellectual, and he had himself started an organization called Le Front Humain, the Human Front. And that had, at one point, 18 to 20,000 people involved in it. And he kind of got fed up with such a large organization and decided, no, it's better if we're sort of closer to our communities, right? And reduce the amount of people involved in one particular organization. So he was sort of suggesting to Garry, well, that kind of bigger organization will come. What I think we need to support you is a Conseil de Solidarité, which is a council of solidarity or support. And Garry's, thought about it and said, well, yeah, I could use some help. I can't do this all on my own. And that's my whole point, is it's up to all of us to do this. So, Robert, if you can do this, please, go for it. So in a very short time, Sarazak, because he was a very powerful speaker and well-known French intellectual, he convinced well-known Parisians to join the council. People such as Albert Camus, the writer, André Breton, editors of multiple popular French newspapers, other artists and poets and writers and peace activists. I mean, I don't know, the council was maybe 50 to 100 people at one point. So then Garry was sort of surprised that all these people, were coming to, his aid, or coming to the aid of the idea of the world citizenship movement. And at first he was a little bit turned off by it. Well, why are these, well-known people coming to give my support to this movement? Is it because they really want to have the movement have a soul to it, in a sense, or is there some other reason behind it? Well, so Sarazak said, and Garry became an expert at this, was to raise public awareness and to always put out a press release before he did something, so people would know what was going to happen, and so that the press would come. So Sarazak arranged for a big press meeting and a public meeting. So what really gave this council, you might say, the nod of approval, was it just so happened that Albert Camus, the well-known French writer who wrote The Plague and La Chute and other important French novels, came to the event. And then when Sarazak looked across the room to Camus and said, will you join us in this Conseil de Solidarité? And Camus went, and that little nod was enough to really launch this council to support Garry. And then Garry gave a short statement, which is on page 47, which I would like to, it's not that long, so I'll take a moment to read that statement. Garry basically sort of had the last word at this event. And he said, world citizenship is like a baby today. It is innocent and pure, awkward and helpless. These men and women whom you have just heard sense that innocence and helplessness. Such understanding rises above sectarian interests. And before I finish that quote, let me just mention the point that it was amazing to Garry that so many people from different, capitalists, communists, environmentalists, and other groups were at this meeting who normally wouldn't come together because they might have been arguing with each other about, economics or politics. But people from so many different walks of life were sitting in the same room because world citizenship had brought them together. A higher thought, a higher awareness had brought them together. So he continues, such helplessness is our greatest strength. I admit my helplessness and confess my innocence before you. Yet many men and women of different opinions have risen here to support one man. So that one man now rises, and speaking for himself only as one human person, declares his support of all humanity as represented by these good men and women of the newly formed Conseil de Solidarité. Such is the key formula of world citizenship. Such is the measure of brotherhood. Thank you all for being here. So Garry recognized, even though at first he was a little bit concerned about what this Conseil, this council would do, that he realized that bringing all these different people together from different walks of life was really the point of world citizenship, that people could work together, that we didn't have to fight each other, we didn't have to have conflict, we could rise above that. So Garry, of course, wanted to make sure that the public knew the very moral nature of his renunciation of citizenship, of his refusal to be papered or documented. I mean, every time the French government tried to give him a temporary what is it? Now I can't remember the term. Permis de séjour, residence permit, right? He would always either refuse to take it, or if they forced it in him, he would just throw it in the garbage can on the way out. And then even if they asked for it later, he's like, "Well, I got rid of that. That doesn't represent me, right?" So he wanted people to know though why he refused to be papered or documented. And I have to say, one common misconception about Garry was that he ripped up his U.S. passport. That is not true. He handed in his U.S. passport when he gave up his U.S. citizenship at the U.S. Embassy in Paris. Legally, he had to hand it in. They asked for it. And of course, that's also explained in the film The World Is My Country. But all these other little papers that other governments tried to give him, those sometimes he did rip up or just refused to accept. And he also wanted people to know why he camped out on this international territory that was declared by the UN at the Palais de Chaillot. He felt that his message, with the help of this Council of Solidarity, finally became clear at that press conference. So he was really delighted with this. And so he didn't mind the fact that maybe some celebrities had come to support his cause, or that there were some people, who are maybe doing some self-promotion behind him or with him, along with him, and that was okay. Because anyway, this helped the public know of the seriousness of his world citizenship mission. So Garry realized that he was on a world stage, and Martin Sheen in the film says Garry left from the Broadway stage to the world stage, and that is true. And Garry used the term, "I need to be a press agent for humanity," right? Just like I said, I need to be the lawyer for humanity and the earth, and this is really true. Humanity needs us as representatives to speak for it as one, right? So certainly some in the media thought, especially the very patriotic media, both in the United States and in the Soviet Union, looked upon Garry as like, sometimes they would use a word like crackpot or spy or something like that to denigrate his actions, to belittle his actions. And at first, I think that certainly bothered Garry. But once this Council of Solidarity was founded, the mainstream press certainly began to realize the importance of Garry's actions, of Garry's words, and could not deny its impact, especially, and Michael mentioned this, especially as individuals such as Albert Einstein, Richard Wright, Jean-Paul Sartre, and others gave their voices to Garry's cause. They could not deny the power of Garry's actions. So Garry felt now that his reputation was intact, And he wanted to raise more attention. Just like I said, Garry was always good at doing something, some kind of taking some action that would garner attention in the world, which he needed to do to keep the idea of world citizenship in people's minds, especially as the Cold War was becoming further and further entrenched. So he said to himself, what could we do now to raise further attention about the importance of world citizenship and world government? Well, so if we turn to page 50 of chapter 4, Garry had heard that Trygve Lie, who was the first Secretary General of the United Nations, was considering creating a world security or peace force, right? So Garry thought, why don't he offer himself up as the first world police officer, right? And so he got the Council of Solidarity together and talked with Sarrazac and Camus and others and said, well, why don't we create a peace force that we can enter into the UN General Assembly as a peace force and show the power of the people, us the people, and how we could provide peace for humanity beyond the nation state system and the arguing of the nations within that UN assembly. So they together secretly, almost over a 2-week period, and they had to keep this secret because if they hadn't, they would not have been able to get into the balconies of the United Nations General Assembly. And so they call this Opération Oran, or Operation Oran, because Oran, which is, of course, a city in Algeria, was the principal, you might say, character in the background of the book The Plague by Albert Camus. So that's where he got the name for this action. So this event would be an interruption of a UN General Assembly session to call upon the UN representatives to form either to accept the world citizens as world peace officers, so we could work together at that higher level, or to create a world parliament. And it ended up that, I think, after speaking with the Council of Solidarity, they decided that it might be best to sort of leave the peace or police officer aspect behind and really talk about us coming together, or the UN moving beyond itself. And many people who supported the UN at that point in the mid 1940s actually thought, okay, we can actually create a world government out of the UN. We can take it further, especially through UN reformation, using Article 109 of the UN to have charter review and take things out of that charter that are preventing humans to come together at that higher level and bring in things that will unite us at the higher level beyond the nation state. Not at all getting rid of the nation states, but to move beyond them to prevent war. So what they did was they planned this so well that they had their own, in a sense, their own officers who were protecting the people who were going to be going from the Council of Solidarity to the different balconies within the UN to talk to the public at this UN General Assembly, but really to talk to the world, not just really to talk to the representatives there, because they knew that this would get major media. So on November 19th of 1948, so actually, just about 7 days a week from now, back in 1948, a group of about 50 speakers headed to the UN and were able to sit in the public areas in the balconies at the Palais de Chaillot so they could make this Oran declaration. And well, Garry made it in secretly somehow, and no one gave him much mind. But a couple people, one who was a sound person and one who was a camera person or light person, saw Garry, and of course Garry was pretty much world famous at this point. They knew who he was, so they started putting sound and wires so they could put a mic in the balcony where Garry was, and turning on the lights. And Gary was like, "Oh no!" And he started slinking in his seat. It ended up that Camus came in a trench coat and a hat to sort of sit in front of Garry, so that they wouldn't know that Garry was behind him, because they with the trench coat and the hat, they didn't know it was Camus either. And that helped protect Garry till the beginning of this action. Well, so the Trygve Lie and the then president of the General Assembly, Dr. Herbert Evatt, finally they came in, and entered the chambers, and Evatt opened the session. And this session happened to be, and it could be today, what's going on now. They were talking about atomic weapons and nuclear use of nuclear fuel, and what could that, further devastating things could that do beyond what had already happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? So they were arguing about this, and it was the Eastern Bloc countries that were talking first. And going on and on, and so they were like, okay, Garry was thinking, when can I actually make a stand here and give a voice to the people? They had this whole speech, and we'll get to that in just a moment. And so finally, after about 45 minutes to an hour of these speeches going on and on about the atomic weapons, one of the speakers stopped, and there was a momentary break, and Garry stood up, jumped the balcony railing, and began. He said, "I interrupt in the name of the people of the world not represented here." And then Dr. Evatt, down in front at the podium, looked up, and everything became silent, and raised his hand as if to motion to Garry, well, continue, we're listening. And at that point, though, UN security guards had come and were starting to pull Garry away from the balcony and trying to pull him out because he was sort of upstaging the UN event with his speech. And all he could do was sort of yell certain mottos like "one government for one world, I pass the word to the people." But such a clever plan, of course, were the other 49 or so people in the other balconies in the UN who then took up the speech. And Sarrazac, for example, in French, gave the whole speech, the Oran Declaration, that Garry, because he was whisked away, could not completely give. And in other languages, over like the next half hour, everyone was mesmerized. There was someone from Togo who was speaking in the Togo language. There were people from other countries speaking in their languages, giving this declaration. And basically, the UN had to listen. And of course, all the media was there because they were there anyway for the UN, but then even more so to hear this speech. Well, so Garry was detained in the Palais for a few hours, and that was then released on the streets of Paris by a French police officer. And as he let Garry go on the streets, the police officer asked him, well, how much does a world policeman earn? Because he could see how important it would be to be protecting the whole earth, right? But could he survive on that compensation? Well, so now what I'd like to do, and then we can go into some questions because I see we're coming close to the end of the hour, but to read the Oran Declaration that Garry and others, Garry started, and that others in the UN chambers in 1948 said. So, Mr. Chairman and delegates, I interrupt you in the name of the people of the world not represented here. Though my words may be unheeded, our common need for world law and order can no longer be disregarded. We, the people, want the peace which only a world government can give. The sovereign states you represent divide us and lead us to the abyss of total war. I call upon you no longer to deceive us by this illusion of political authority. I call upon you to convene forthwith a world constituent assembly to raise the standard around which all men can gather, the standard of true peace of one government for one world. And if you fail us in this, stand aside, for a People's World Assembly will arise from our own ranks to create such a government. We can only be served by nothing less.
Oh my God. David, brilliant summary of chapter 4, but also the thing you have all this background information, little tidbits, you can, add on. So it was so rich. And Michael, you did a great summary of chapter 3. Thank you both. Oh my gosh, for doing that. That was brilliant. Brought tears to my eyes. Just beautiful. Just beautiful. Appreciate you. Oh, look, we have the World Passport and the movie on DVD for anybody. And the World Passport, everyone here should get, if you don't have one already, please consider getting the World Passport. It is an important symbol of our power. And thank you again, everybody. I will let you go. Mwah!